Hello dear viewers, and welcome to another video from this here old dwarf. I ventured up from the ancient hold the other day to behold sunlight embracing the mountain. It seems warmer weather is coming this way. I'm now back under the earth in the sacred hold of our ancestors as I discuss the video game Diablo 2 Resurrected. I have previously discussed Diablo 1, which you can find a link for on screen now. As is usual by this point, if I could just mention that if you like what I do here in the Ancient Hold, then perhaps consider subscribing if you haven't already, give this video a thumbs up, and perhaps leave a comment with your thoughts on the game. Diablo 2 Resurrected is a remastered version of the classic isometric action role-playing game Diablo 2. This version of the venerable game has updated graphics and network connectivity, though TCP/IP connections are no longer supported, along with a few quality of life additions like automatic gold pickup and a shared stash, allowing players to easily transfer items between their own characters. The new three-dimensional models are overlaid the original in-game sprites, which allows the player to seamlessly switch between the shiny new graphics and the classic older ones. So, should you wish to play in either mode, it is simply a single click away. Down here in the Undermountain, I've played through the original version of the game several times, but never got into the whole endgame thing, grinding for certain items and rune words and such, so I won't try to comment on what might be the best strategy to get this or that, or what the best class is. What I'm going to focus on is the general gameplay of the game as your average player will encounter. That is, the graphics, sound, story, characters and combat etc., while leaving discussions of what is a great endgame build or best in slot items and so forth to those better qualified to do so. I will give my perspective as a simple old dwarf playing through the game in a casual way. So, Diablo 2, unless you've been living under a rock. Well, you live under a rock. A huge mountain of it, in fact. Yes, well, that is true, yes, okay. Unless you've been quietly sleeping in the depths of the ocean in a house at Rylea. If you have any affinity for video games and are of a certain age, then you most likely have heard of Diablo 2. It is legend. It is seen as the granddaddy of the isometric action role-playing game. It was here that the grimdark battle against evil and the thrill of loot chasing took hold. The general gameplay in Diablo 2, as is most ARPGs since its release, entails moving your character around a map, laying waste to any and all evildoers while following the story as it unfolds. There are complexities, of course, involving gearing and talent builds and all sorts, but generally the base core of the gameplay remains simple and very effective. Control your character and use it to unleash hell, pun intended, upon all the evil denizens of the land. The fancy new graphics of Diablo 2 Resurrected are nice to look at and, I think at least, are quite in keeping with the dark theme of the game. The extra details added to the characters and scenes does well. It looks very much modernified and pretty while still keeping in theme, which is important, as some other Blizzard remasters have failed to do. In the original version of the game, strewn around each map were signs of a helltide sweeping the land. There are dead bodies, murdered NPCs and pools of blood, just to name a few of the terrible sights that heap on more insidious and darkness to proceedings. The updated graphics do a great job of bringing such scenes into view. Resurrected also adds more detail to maps, where perhaps there was a simple rock wall as a boundary of a zone, uninterrupted. Now there might be a wagon or a tent to break a steady line. Nice little touches that don't diminish the original style. This is not to say that the original graphics are anything to smirk at. The two-dimensional graphics and sprites have a classic charm to them from an era before everything was three-dimensional. Good pixel art is still pleasant to the modern eye. They are lower resolution without lighting effects and so forth that modern graphics would bring, but they do indeed have their own charm, I feel. You can easily play through the game with either graphics set, so just go with what you want. I personally played through the majority of the game with the new graphics, as I was interested to see how it all looks. The sound is such a game as this, going for a theme as it does of dark and grim, it is vital to proceedings. The music, the dialogue and general sound design of characters and monsters can easily make or break the mood of any video game. Thankfully, just like Diablo 1, the sound design for Diablo 2 is top notch. There are eerie ambient tones that play as you move across the map or enter the dungeon, and layers to the dark symphony that evokes darkness and dread. The game atmosphere created is most dark indeed, with murky music and evil rhythms providing the backdrop to your battle against evil. Just as important is the feedback from weapons clashing and monsters monstering. It is well done here, allowing you to feel the visceral combat even more. The story of Diablo 2 is on a somewhat grander scale than the original. Whereas in Diablo 1 everything in the game resided around the village of Tristram and the catacombs below the cathedral there, the sequel covers great parts of the world of Sanctuary, from woodlands to sun-beaten deserts to snowy peaks and the bowels of hell. This allowed the developers more freedom to create varied and unique backdrops for the maps in each of the acts of the game. This in turn allowed a diversity of monster designs which vary enough to keep things interesting. There is indeed a wide variety of monsters throughout the game, and they look good in both the 2-dimensional pixels and the high-definition 3-dimensional update. To briefly recap, in Diablo 1, the titular bad guy had possessed a young boy and was now residing at the bottom of the deep levels underneath the cathedral in Tristram. The hero player character delves deep under the village, dispatching Hell's denizens along the way. He will defeat zombies and devils and skeletons, the butcher, and the fallen kind, to name a few. In the final and deepest level, Diablo can be found and is thusly defeated, his spirit falling back into the Soulstone and revealing the young boy to be the younger son of King Leoric. In the final scene, our hero, later understood to be the boy's older brother, pushes the Soulstone into his own forehead in an attempt to contain the evil of the Lord of Terror. Quite a dramatic solution, I must say. Diablo 2 begins shortly after the events of the first game. Though there was much rejoicing after the initial defeat of Diablo, Aiden, the character from the first game who plunged the Soulstone into his own body, is slowly becoming twisted and consumed by the foul evil. Unexpectedly, he leaves Tristram and heads into the east. Always into the east. After he leaves the village, it is set upon by the minions of hell and destroyed. Heroes must arise to defeat the Lord of Terror once more. Before beginning the game, you must select a class. You can pick from an assassin that makes use of shadowy abilities, traps and martial arts, the Amazon that takes pride in their use of javelin and other ranged weaponry, the barbarian who employs the riddle of steel and great shouts to destroy his foes, the druid who can take the form of feral beasts or employ the magic of the earth and storms, the necromancer who uses dark powers to raise the dead and make use of bone magic, the paladin who uses righteous might to smite thy foes, and the sorceress who controls the magical elements to zap and burn evilry. As you can see, there is a great choice of classes here, enabling the player to pick that which suits their own playstyle. You begin the game in the rogue encampment. Their order has been driven out of their ancestral monastery by the lesser evil Andariel. It is from here you must cleanse the cathedral in your ongoing quest to defeat the great evil. Characters in Diablo 2 have 3 talent trees which the player can allocate skill points when they level up. Some are passive buffs like extra defense or move speed, while others will be active abilities like damaging spells or deadly strikes with a blade. I chose a barbarian, initially using throwing axes to sunder my foes from afar until I got a fancy 2-handed sword and decided to start swinging it about. You can map skills to the left and right mouse buttons, so you can only have 2 skills ready to go at once. There are fancy ways to flip between skills on the fly though, should you wish. The combat is decent enough, though if you're used to the new ARPGs like Grim Dawn or Path of Exile with multiple skills available, you might think it a little primitive, and that is okay. There are reasons why those games came later as they did, building on the foundations set here. As you progress through the levels, the story will unfold, both from your actions in-game and by wonderfully animated cutscenes that are in keeping with the traditionally wonderful CGI movies from Blizzard. It will culminate with the final battle with Diablo and onward to the expansion should you wish. Even if I was just playing the original Diablo 2 without the graphical upgrade and all that, I would still be saying right now that this game is worth a look. It can be a bit daunting with all the different builds and guides and rune words and everything, but you can easily get through the game on lower difficulties just by playing how you want to. Or, if you're an aged enjoyer of tough ARPGs, there's all the more complicated stuff to get into, with all the higher difficulties too. Diablo 2 is still a solid game. The update to Diablo 2 has given a new look of paint to a fabulous old machine, giving an extra shine to the old girl like a freshly polished old dwarven blade used to defend the ancient hold. The game is available only from Blizzard themselves, but it does get reduced whenever they have a sale. I know there is a lot of animosity, and rightly so, with the behaviour of Activision Blizzard and their poor handling of games and their attitude to their own staff, so I would understand why you might pass on this game because of it. This is all built on the core foundation of the original Blizzard game from back in the day, before they became troubled. It is well tried and tested to be a quality product with their legacy has done well with. Do as you will, dear viewer. And there we go, another video from me here in the ancient dwarven hold of our ancestors. I thank you for sticking with us for this long. I hope you're doing well, and I shall see you next time.